A pop-up. Okay, so welcome to the Student Access Working Group. Let me also share my screen. Folks can see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
All right, perfect. So agenda for today, this is a follow-up from last week's discussion where we started working through our recommendations that we'll be bringing to the August 13th commission meeting. Our working group is focused on bringing recommendations for dual enrollment and credentials of value. We started that conversation last week. It was very good. In the meeting attachment of this, there are a couple Word documents. In them are the draft recommendations that we're going to use to frame the discussion for today. So we're going to do a quick roll call of working group members. I believe we have a quorum, but let's just make sure. So Paul Costello,
Present.
Gabrielle Hendricks,
Here.
Radenka Marich,
Here.
Henry Martin, don't believe he's here, Jeff Newton,
Here.
thank you, Alice Pritchard,
Here.
Christina Royal,
Here.
thank you, and Charlene Russell Tucker, not here yet, and Ari Santiago, he let me know he's going to be a couple minutes late. But we do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have a quorum. So we're going to vote on the meeting minutes from last week. They were dated July 21st. They were in the calendar invite of this. So are there any corrections to the minutes that were dated on July 21st?
This is Alice. I'll make a motion to adopt.
Thank you, Alice. Can I have a second motion?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes at 1:05 p.m. Thank you, everyone. And so we're joined with our working group and also invitees throughout higher education, state government. A lot of these folks were on the call last week, but I'm just going to call out some folks who weren't here last week. If you could just quickly introduce yourself and maybe just talk for 30 seconds about some of the work you're doing in career pathways as it relates to dual enrollment or credentials of value. Um, I see Irene Parisi. Thank you for joining us today. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. So Irene Parisi, I serve as the Chief Academic Officer for the State Department of Education. And what that means, that's the federal programs, titles, all the content areas, career and technical education, and adult education. So with all of that, we do talk a lot about career pathways, innovating on our high schools, as well as a connection to adult ed and assuring that they're attaining their own post-secondary goals. So yes, the conversations are present and ongoing.
Thanks, Irene. Tracy Ariel.
Hello, everybody. Tracy Ariel. I'm the Director of Workforce and Business Engagement for the Office of Workforce Strategy. I am currently overseeing the Lumina work the Credential of Value work, Future Ready States for OWS, taking over for Christina Testabuzzi, who has moved on to CT State. And I am also leading a grant with Northeastern to review and credential the manufacturing pipeline initiative pathways with Electric Boat. We are working on a welding credential initially with the hopes that we'll be able to create a digital credential working with the Office of Higher Ed and Sean Supersede to see if we can build a framework for a place for people in the state of Connecticut to put their credentials.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
Troy Miller, I apologize, you're not on the slide here. But Troy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Troy Miller. I serve as the Vice President for Enrollment Management here at CT State.
Thank you, Troy. And Ari Santiago is just joining. Ari, if you can hear me, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself.
Oh, hi Ben. Yes, thank you. Sorry for being late. Ari Santiago. I am the board chair at CSCU, and excited to be here and part of the team.
Yep. And Ari has formally been included in the commission and is on this working group. Before I go to the next slide, just a quick communications note for the working group members and commission members. So there is a Career Pathways LinkedIn. We want to tag you. So if you're comfortable, please drop your LinkedIn handle in the chat. Or you could just say yes, we could easily find you, but just let us know if we can start tagging you in those posts. And then also, if you wouldn't mind sharing the contact info for your communications team or person we could go to as this process goes on, we would love to have, a good communication strategy working with all of your organizations, and we will probably be reaching out to them. And Bridget, if you wouldn't mind just grabbing those handles, responses, and putting them in our notes. All right. Thank you. So I just wanted to put our working I'm sorry, I lost you guys. Let me just I like being able to see everybody here. Okay. Um, I want to put some of our work in context because last week we started the process of making recommendations for dual enrollment and credentials. And at the same time, we're kind of building the framework of what this whole system is going to look like. And absolutely none of this is set in stone. And this is actually going to be presented to all of you at the next commission meeting on the 13th. But I wanted to share a potential structure just so we really have the mindset of what we're talking about. So in general, we're talking about a career pathway system that would be organized by industry. This is something that we got your feedback on last week. We heard very clear that, between organizing by industry or post-secondary outcome, we don't want to track students into CT or college. So this system would be organized by industry, some sort of hybrid model where students could, go deep on some college credits, go deep on credentials if that's what they so choose. It would be phased in over multiple years, and the thinking here is still very early, but just looking at how other states have done it, this has more or less been the process. There might be a year of some technical assistance or planning grants, things like that. And there would be a set standard that districts participating in this program would meet. So again, there would be technical assistance to help them reach that standard. There might be funding to help them participate in the Pathways program. But the big takeaway of this is that we want Pathway programs to be accessible to all students. And for us and for our working group and what we're charged with doing, that really means dramatically scaling the dual enrollment and credential offerings that exist today. And then the potential pathways experience. So this is a slide that's basically showing, okay, what are those foundational elements that all schools would be required to meet to participate in this program? For all students, there would be personalized advising, career exploration, durable skills, foundational academics. And then for the actual pathway foundational elements, what we're responsible for doing is providing recommendations on how, as a state, we can make it so that every school participating in this can offer dual enrollment courses. Right now, I have 9 college credits on the slide. This is up for discussion. It'll be up for discussion on the 13th, if that's the right number, and some sort of credential of value. Also, there would be optional elements. So again, for those students who are in pathways that, it's very obvious that they're going to be going on to a bachelor's program, they want to get more college credit. We need to make recommendations to make that accessible for them. Um, so this is basically something that we've been sort of talking around about, and the Governance and Pathways Design Working Group started to introduce this last meeting. Again, there's going to be a longer discussion on the 13th about it, but I just wanted to show it to you so that we can start solidifying it and make our work concrete. And before I move on to the next slide, just general reactions. Would love to hear from you all if this is what you've been hearing throughout the process. This is mainly for the working group members who have been in the commission, but is this really what you've been hearing? Is there anything that jumps out to you that you're nervous about? Is there anything that you're really excited about? And if nothing, that's okay also.
Ben, I might just suggest, this is Alice, that work-based learning and advanced work-based learning may cause some definitional questions and challenges. So we might want to revisit, kind of that. I really appreciate the advance because I think that's an effort to put CTEX kind of on the picture, which I do appreciate. So I just think those two things might get a little blurry. So maybe some differentiated titling would be good. I don't know what that is just yet, but I'll think about it.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Agree. I'll look for some wording as well.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Okay. Moving on to the next slide. So at the last meeting, multiple people said that it would be really helpful if we started with laying out the existing dual enrollment courses and credentials that are currently offered and align them to pathways. And that would really help us start to identify the gaps and areas of need. I agree that's a very logical approach. So in between last week and this week, I did that in healthcare because, as we all know, healthcare is the largest employment sector in the state. It's very likely to be one of the pathways that comes out of this program. And really, the purpose of this exercise isn't to make a draft curriculum. That's not what we're asked to do. That's not the recommendation, but it's to put into perspective what we need to think about as we're building our recommendations, right? So not a model curriculum. Um, but what we really need to do and recommend is further than a curriculum. Is we need to make recommendations on how we could systemize access to credentials and dual enrollment offerings so that all school districts could participate in this program. So basically what I did is I used the CSDE Health Science Career Cluster from Perkins. I selected 4 tracks from that document: diagnostic services, health informatics, etc., basically ranging from more entry-level healthcare jobs to ones like biotech, where we know that person might need a bachelor's, even a PhD. I pulled the industry recognized credentials that are on that list that CSDE keeps, and I tried to put them to each pathway where they could be relevant. And then I looked at dual enrollment course completions from last year, and I filtered for healthcare sciences and relevant life and physical sciences, and then organized them by, this is sort of a foundational course, this is intermediate, this is advanced, just to see what's out there. And if we were to start really organizing this in a potential pathway, what we're going to run into. So again, like, I'm sure everyone here would find something wrong with this. That's not the point. The point is just to show why this is challenging and why coordination is needed. So just starting with diagnostic services, so jobs like, lab testing and medical imaging, there are obviously industry recognized credentials that align with this pathway. I don't know if any of them on their own would be considered a credential of value. And I know that definition is still being sorted out, but not a lot of these credentials really lead to a living wage. So something to think about in a lot of these pathways, we have to make sure that the credentials are actually stackable to a credential of value. And I know that's hard given the current system and structure, but if that's what we're saying we're going to offer every student, it's something that we really need to take seriously. On the right, I put all the dual enrollment course offerings from last year that could be associated with the diagnostic services pathway. And what you'll see, and I'm sure people who are working in this know, is that you're going to have situations where only one institute of higher education offers a course as a dual enrollment course. There are going to be situations where multiple do, situations where the 3 public systems and some privates offer the course. There are also situations where a course could be relevant across multiple tracks, right? Like introduction to the healthcare profession could make sense for a lot of healthcare pathway programs. And when you start thinking about a school district having to navigate this for, you know, healthcare, maybe advanced manufacturing, maybe business, a couple others, and 4 or 5 pathways within each track, this very quickly becomes way too confusing and challenging for them to navigate on their own. So a core part of our recommendation really needs to be, if we're going to have a statewide dual enrollment system for districts to plug into, we have to help them decide which courses they should offer for the track, what track they make sense for, and how to get teachers certified for them. Because the big thing is how districts are choosing now which dual enrollment courses they offer is sort of what teachers they have certified currently. And
Sorry,
also
Ben,
for students,
sorry, Ben, I have a
yeah,
comment. When it comes to healthcare, a lot of really comes to accreditation. And
right,
like what is the number of the students per faculty, for the nursing, simulation rooms. So all of that is influenced by accreditation. So one really has to think that in nursing schools, and I would say this is all under the nursing, the accreditation requires six students per faculty. So keep that in mind when you present those opportunities,
yeah,
because you don't want to have them to have a degree without institution being accredited.
right. And just to clarify, Rodank, are you talking about students when they're in a nursing program like in college or high school
Mhm.
students who are in a
No,
pathway?
no, in the college.
Right, right. Totally agree. I think what we're doing here is we're laying out like potential high school pathways and trying to figure out, okay, for the dual enrollment course offerings, where they could align and what we're going to start running into. And I know that some of those pathways, like a high school student might have to get some clinical hours as part of the credential and such.
That's correct. And
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So you really have to be, even if the high school, it has to be linked to hospital and
right.
accrediting institution, and then because accreditation is the biggest part of all of this.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
And
Um,
Ben, why
yeah.
is CT State listed separately from CSCU?
Some of these courses, it's just when you look at the dual enrollment course completions, some are through a community college, some are through one of the four CSCU four-year colleges. They
Okay.
offer dual enrollment courses separately.
And then Charter Oak.
You know what, Charter Oak? I don't think they came up on the dual enrollment course
Yeah, probably
completions.
not. Yeah, probably not dual enrollment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
so just real quick, the courses you're seeing here basically just means that it was offered in one high school. So it's not at
Got it.
all like saying this is offered across the state, this is super scalable, and now a ton of students are taking them. If it was completed by a student, it ends up being on that list. But just moving on, because again, I don't want to get caught up in the intricacies of each one, but what I want to show you are the major themes and things that we need to think about for making recommendations on dual enrollment. So again, like you'll have situations where only one institute of higher education offers a course, situations where multiple do. Um, if we keep moving on to something like the health informatics pathway, so this is like your medical billing and coding professionals, it starts to get really thin on which dual enrollment courses could really make sense for the pathway. And I think, there are probably multiple tracks in multiple pathways where this could end up being the case. So for our group to think about is, do we want a recommendation on saying, you know, this is just not a track that would be offered in a career pathways program because the dual enrollment courses really aren't there? Or are we going to say, some of these careers, they don't really require a 2 or 4 year degree. It's more of a certification path, a licensure path, and that's what's going to be built out throughout the high school track. Continuing on, so therapeutic services. So this is nursing. Obviously, this one would be very popular. And this is also an area where like a lot of coordination between institutes of higher education would be necessary because you have a lot of courses offered by a lot of different institutions. And especially as you move down into those more intermediate and advanced courses, you really only have one institution that's offering each course. So if we're going to build like a plug and play model for schools to use, you really need to think about selecting courses that would transfer and even potentially articulate into whatever degree it is that student would be pursuing. And then the last one, oh, I'm sorry, the biotech pathway. So again, I just took all the dual enrollment course offerings from last year, things that might make sense for biotech, and this is a track where you would have students who are likely going to college. They're likely going to go into a bachelor's degree if they're interested in biotech. And for those students, what are we offering? Like if we're saying the floor of a career pathways program is 3 dual enrollment credits, but you have students interested in a pathway like this where we know they're going to want to go to college, how do you offer more credits to those students? Do you offer deeper coursework in a biotech pathway, right, that a student might really be interested in, but that's also challenging to transfer or articulate across different institutions for different majors? Or do we start thinking about, could we negotiate a college core in the way Indiana did, where they basically got institutions to agree on a 30 credit gen ed block that could be offered through dual enrollment? So for those students who might be in the biotech pathway, and we end up saying, okay, there are really only 3 or 4 courses that we know could transfer across institutions, but you could go on and get 30 credits through gen eds, that's still very valuable to that student who's going to be going to college next year. So with all of this in mind, we're going to spend the rest of the time really building out the recommendations that will be presented on the 13th. These are in the Word docs that were attached in the meeting invite. And right now, where we're at with the recommendations is they're very high level, and we want your input to talk through the considerations and implications of each one so that we can start to develop more robust recommendations. And the plan from here is we're meeting again August 11th. So we're going to take the feedback from the discussion today and have like a polished presentation for your review and feedback that we would use going into the meeting on the 13th. So before I transition to that, are there any questions on what I just presented? Was anything not clear? Do people agree with, the general themes that I laid out?
So Ben, I have a comment.
Yeah.
So I think it would be beneficial when you listed all of this, like to say what are the key advantages what you are proposing. Like why you are introducing. Is it faster job market entry for people who cannot afford and after high school they have certificates and they bypass multiple years academic program? Is it lower educational debt? Is it tuition assisted? If they go to hospital, they will have opportunity to go for nursing or other medical fields. Like, I think it will be benefit, not just we are introducing those courses, but what are the really key benefits?
Right. That's a good point. And I would say all of the above. Anyone else, for the folks who are really deep in dual enrollment, like does this align with what you see in your day-to-day work? Are these some of the challenges that you would see coming down the pike if we're making recommendations for this? Things we need to think about?
I think it does. Some of it too, Ben, is the terminology for the courses. So like
Mhm.
how you have them broken down by universities and colleges. I think you have courses that actually overlap or double dip. It's just because of the title of the course, it doesn't look like it's either the same course outcomes or like learning objectives. So I think that's the other piece too, is across all the Connecticut institutions, understanding what is general chemistry at UConn versus CT State versus CSCU system versus the privates.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. Like right now, if a student takes General Chemistry 1 in high school, it's a dual enrollment course. The only course that's available to them is 1 through CT State. Can they take that credit to UConn or a private? It varies
Well,
probably, right?
that's my point, because like UConn, like ECE, we have chemistry 1127 and 1127Q. So even though it's not called general chemistry, it's still your intro chemistry classes with a
Right.
lab component. So I think that's where you get into that piece. But the articulation between courses across state institutions would be critical too, because I think it gets back to your question about if a partner school has an already certified chemistry teacher with, say, Central, but then they have a biology teacher or a Chem 2 teacher certified through UConn, they shouldn't have to worry about flip-flopping those instructors. It should be more about these clusters of courses satisfy the requirements we need to be satisfied within the existing pathway, regardless of what institution they're getting it from.
Yeah. And Chris, I think that's a great segue to start going deep on the
We
Can I
have
recommendation.
add some?
Daryl from Yukon online, and I know
Yep.
that we try to ease some transfer courses because we have 700 or above transfer student annually to Yukon, and some classes are not recognized or some courses. So to Daryl, why don't you take us through the process and just be a little more specific and granular?
Yeah, and I think Chris speaks to that in terms of the transferability. Obviously, faculty at each college and school review and determine if the course coming from a different institution meets the rigor and standards of that particular course here at UConn. The students do insert that at the point of admissions. It's reviewed by the college or school, the advisors as well, to determine if it will be accepted in that space. And I think this is something that Chris is getting to as well about the courses. We may have it categorized, classified as something else, but if it is a different called class at CT State and our faculty review and say it is the same as or would be the same as chemistry here, they will accept that credit at UConn as that general chemistry course, as long as it'll go through the review to determine if it's at that level. And I think a lot of classes that are in state have gone through a lot of that review because they've looked at the syllabus and everything of that nature here. So a lot of them have done it. It's probably going to be more of these newer classes developed and things that would come in for the faculty to review, the faculty committees to review and determine if that's going to be the case.
Thank you, Daryl. That's really helpful. And I think ultimately where we want to get to, and I think you all need to make the recommendations. I'm not making them. But in a Pathways program where there's a plug and play curriculum for schools to do, we don't have to make the curriculum, but we need to say, like, we're only going to include those courses that we know are going to transfer, or we need to take the step to have them transfer across institutions. Because what we don't want to do is start offering pathway programs and students are taking these courses and then the burden is on them to figure out where they go. Like, let's get rid of that from the get-go. Irene, I see a hand.
Yes, thank you. I think it's important. So going back to one of the very first screens that you had as part of your slide deck, it's referencing the previous career clusters. So I think it's important to
Yeah.
go forward with the newly adopted, because we as a state agency adopted the advanced CTE career clusters and subclusters. So there's probably some substantial changes. So I think that may have to be remapped because it is
Yeah.
different. It's healthcare and human services, and then there's 7 subclusters that are
Yep.
very different now. So
Yeah, totally agree. I couldn't find an actual document online. I saw there was like a YouTube video just for the point of the exercise to lay out like what we need to think about. I just went with it, but totally agree. Like if this career pathways program, let's say it's really launching a year from now, I think it would make total sense to follow the updated Perkins, the modernized Perkins clusters. Totally agree. Karen?
Thanks, Ben. Just looking at the one of the slides, I guess I'm thinking about some potential gaps. So if we're talking 9 credits, how do we know or how do we advise students on what those 9 credits would be and when do they get to the career courses? So if you're looking at 9 credits, those could be in gen ed because they may also fit the prerequisite requirement. So I think
Mhm.
that's something that we really need to look at is how does a student move from high school courses to the college courses, and then when do they demonstrate readiness, if you will, to take those more advanced courses? So that would require us to look at that 9 credit requirement as well as the prerequisites. Just wanted us to keep that in
Yeah,
mind.
that's a great point. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna really go deep on the recommendations 'cause I think we're already kind of doing that. So we're gonna start with dual enrollment. I'm gonna share the Word doc that was attached in the calendar invite. And Christina's going to walk us through this. And really, this is where we want to hear from you all. Because again, the recommendations up here are very high level. Scrolling down the key considerations, this is where we're going to build them out. And I just want to make sure, can folks see this well? Should I zoom in, zoom out?
It's good.
Cool.
Okay, great. So when we're looking at the recommendations for dual enrollment specifically, and my co-chair Jeff will walk through the credentials of value later. But we have a couple of statements that we're looking to make recommendations on, and definitely want your voice in this. So the first is each career pathway will include the opportunity for students to complete at least 3 dual enrollment courses aligned with the pathway, with an option for them to complete additional courses for college credit. So obviously we want to encourage people to take as many as possible. Thanks, Ben, for kind of jumping. But we do want to set the bar with a minimum to really elevate our state and have this be embedded in the ecosystem of career pathways. And so we know a couple of things that are going to be important in thinking about this recommendation is the availability by pathway. And Ben just showed you a perfect imperfect example of, how we've got courses with different names. We've got institutions offering different courses. And so we'll have to smooth that over, which is why we know that one of the big implications is going to need to map out all of these priority pathways so that there is a clear sense of what the runway is for a student, depending on where they express interest. Another piece that is important with this recommendation is that there is a lot of variety. You see the variety in titles. Sometimes, and this is why sometimes things are labeled differently, is that a course, there might be one learning objective that is different, and it makes the course slightly different, which sometimes creates problems from a transferability. But other times, the faculty at the 2 institutions of higher ed can work together. But that's a concern. And then also looking at providing students with guidance. So that this is really getting into that counseling, advising, and really understanding what are they working towards. We don't want them to take 3 or 4 random courses. We want them to be aligned to a particular course of study that is the lead way for them to build upon it when they finish high school as well. Another consideration is looking at if it's feasible that districts will offer 5 or more courses in each pathway. Is there a baseline of general education dual enrollment courses that could be available if they wanted to pursue further credits? Certainly one of the pieces that I think is an important implication here is that when we start to get down to the course level, and the faculty know this best as well as our academic leaders, but the some of the classes are contextualized for the programs. So for example, it might not be that they just take a math class, but they have to take a math class that's contextualized for nursing. And so that will be a different math class than just a general math class. And so these are getting into some of the reasons why we have inefficiencies with the transfer model in general, but those are definitely considerations. The last one for this recommendation is funding implications. And certainly, we're keeping funding as a priority category for each of the recommendations. How who's paid and how, like the districts being paid, are the institutions of higher ed being paid, what things get paid directly to the students, what's a reimbursement model when we think about books and transportation and other ancillary courses that are essential for their success in a class. So these are a couple of things that we're thinking about as it relates to the first recommendation. Ben, you want to pause and get some feedback?
I think we should pause and get feedback and
Yeah.
go rec by rec. And again, like I'm going
Right.
to take live notes, guys, and basically we're going to form this into more robust recommendations that we'll share with you all, probably before our next working group meeting, so you have time to review them. But would love to just hear feedback on, so this first one of every pathway is going to have the opportunity for students to complete at least 3 dual enrollment courses aligned with the pathway, and then an option for them to complete additional courses for credit. And basically, all the implications of what we showed of just going through, a hypothetical pathway situation, all the problems that might come up. So what further recommendations could we make to smooth those over? Chris.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. I think it still goes back to, and I'd love to hear from Jeff and like his opinion. I think you have to be really careful with how you're framing this with districts regarding how many pathways they need to support and the reality of their FTEs and their ability to support multiple pathways. Like, I think requiring three course clusters in a pathway is reasonable, but are you giving credit to schools that may only be able to support 1 or 2 pathways at their school versus are you really pushing schools to have like multiple pathways beyond that because they just might not have the staffing and the FTE in order to do that? And I do think if you want to be really thoughtful in this, you also have to factor in AP and IB into the larger conversations, or are we counting successful AP with the potential of earning college credit based on that test as part of a potential pathway? So maybe the students in a nursing pathway, they need an English course. They don't run a dual enrollment English course, but they have AP English. Are we giving the school credit for that? Or does it have to be explicitly tied to a concurrent or dual enrollment course?
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. And again, no, we don't have any answers yet. This is for us to talk about and recommend to the full commission, and the full commission is going to talk about it. But thank you for raising those. Irene?
Yeah, thank you. I also want to add to what Chris is saying. It is important to recognize that each district, certainly through the Perkins application process, they have to conduct a comprehensive local needs assessment. And by doing that, they have to have an advisory board. That advisory board, which includes business and industry that are in proximity of that district, informs them like what are the needs of that context. So not every district is going to be able or want to offer the same pathways or related to those clusters, because it is based on the context in which they live and learn and work. So I think there has to be flexibility or recognition of that because they want to build upon the assets of, again, their community, because that's where they get the professional partnerships and professional mentorships. So I wanted to put that out there that is part of the coaching that we provide to our LEAs so that they have a very strong program that students want to be a part of and then go back into the workforce in their own community.
Thank you, Irene.
Thanks.
Anyone else on how we could address, the situations where, let's say, only one institution is offering a course that might make sense for a certain pathway? Because I think there's a decision point of, okay, that just wouldn't be included in like a model curriculum for that school. Or we're going to figure out a way for that to be transferable across multiple institutions. Because like in a perfect world, you'll basically have your industry sectors, your sub tracks, and basically saying here are like X amount of courses that the state recommends. And behind that is an agreement between institutes of higher education that those credits will transfer. Like that's in a perfect world, that's the state we're getting to. Alice?
I kind of want to go back to what Radenka said. I think that the why we're doing this could also inform that. So if we're, trying to ease the transition to college and university, degrees, then maybe, that has a set. If you're trying to dip into kind of technical training opportunities, it's different. So, if we're doing this for, kind of the transferability, then everybody's going to have potentially access to gen eds. It's the technical training pieces that I think might get a little dicier. So, again, back to that kind of what's the context in which we're saying this.
Yeah. Gabrielle?
To kind of add on to what Alice said as well, I think the why also brings how did I say this? I think the why kind of helps to promote the program a bit more because when students understand, okay, why do I have this? Why do I have access to this? Or like how can this help me? They'll be more motivated to enroll into these courses as well.
Yep.
Ben, real quick, just to add to Chris's point earlier in relation to offerings, you get such variation in the size of schools. In southeastern Connecticut, between Old Saybrook, Westbrook, very small high schools versus some larger high schools. Those options to kind of share resources and share opportunities. To me is a very important piece.
So within dual enrollment, thinking about ways to share resources.
Exactly. Yeah, meeting course offerings.
Yep. Commissioner Russell Tucker?
Thank you. It really is summing up what Jeff just said. I've been processing about what equitable access looks like for our students. And to Jeff's point, smaller districts or capacity constraints, does that mean we don't make that offer, that students don't have that in their area? Or are we talking about, I'm saying, sharing services, or how do we support that? So I think that's something we really need to think about in this context. If we're really working towards equitable access for all students, wherever they are, what does that look like? Both from the district side and certainly the IHE that they have access to.
Yeah. I'm gonna put, if it's okay, Kim and Chris on the spot because part of what we do want to say is like some real, clear recommendations. And is this reasonable that as part of the process of putting together pathway programs, there would be, some sort of committee possibly of higher ed that sort of figures out, okay, here are the courses that we would recommend for different tracks, and here are the courses that we know will transfer across our institutions. And the reason I say that is that's how some of the states with statewide dual enrollment programs, they have that. It is like a formal committee. They meet annually to review course offerings, review the pathways, and basically provide recommendations on what should be included in each one so that there's confidence across the board for students, for districts, for higher ed.
Yeah, I mean, I can say I think it's above my pay grade. I think it goes back to sort of that. No, it goes back to that the original conversation around for many departments, it comes down to those department faculty and department chairs and their specific department accreditation as to whether or not they can accept the course as transfer credit. So I think it's possible to get the right people in the room to have those conversations. And I'm pretty sure CSCU, UConn, and CT State have been trying to have those conversations over the year, but it would be who are the right players to be in that space. And it probably isn't your dual enrollment program coordinators.
Thank
Just
you.
to add to that, I mean, I would agree with what Chris said, but I think that it is doable. And I think to do the correct service to support our students in this pathway, this does need to be done. And with the merge of CT State, we had to redo our articulations, you know, with it at Central, just speaking from our perspective at Central. And it was a good exercise to do because we found, you know, exactly what Chris said was happening. They were accepting the same course from one of the CT State campuses, and then they didn't want to from another one. And I don't think that that is appropriate.
Right.
So engaging in the conversation has helped with that. So I would agree. But I think that it's doable and would require a strong working group to make it happen. But it's the correct thing to do to support our students.
Yeah. I think one thing too is like in the final recommendations, there's going to be resources requested. And I think that's part of why we're building out a funding request is we need to think about, okay, what do we need funding for? So we're at 144. I think maybe Christina, could we go through the next two recommendations? I don't know if we have enough time, guys, to talk through all of them because we also want to start introducing the credential recommendations.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll
but
go.
maybe let's
I'll
do
go
the-
quickly.
yeah.
So for the second one, dual enrollment courses within pathways will be sequenced, mapped to a credential, and transferable to higher education for the institutions offering dual enrollment courses. So Ben, if you just scroll
Yeah.
down to the implications, you know, we had talked about prioritizing gen ed basic courses, so it has maximum transferability. But again, that could be problematic for certain career-oriented pathways that have contextualized gen ed courses. We also talked about statewide or master transfer agreements. This is very administration heavy when you talk about making articulation agreements for every single district. And so if we could have a template for the entire state and then, you know, have students or have districts be part of that blanket master agreement, that certainly would reduce some of the paperwork aspect of things that make this challenging. And then also looking at, you know, who's going to support the transferability of credits. You know, are we going to have in a same parallel of the conversation about governance? Like, is it going to be a coordinating council? Is it, you know, how are we going to make sure that we can coordinate all the respective agencies? So, any quick feedback on any of those points for the second recommendation?
What about the prioritizing gen ed versus really trying to go deep in some of these pathways? Would love to, you know, I don't want to just take the path of least resistance, but, you know, what's really doable if we're going to have, you know, statewide dual enrollment program that's really easy for districts to plug into?
Yeah, I also don't know. I know my provost couldn't attend, but I've got my VP of Enrollment Management and Associate VP. So I don't know, Troy or Tamika, do you have any suggestions?
I can just add that definitely based on, you know, my experience and conversations over the years, that prioritizing the gen ed is going to be critical, right? I think that's what helps us build the strongest pathways. I think that's what makes it simplest for the districts and the IHEs is to make sure that we have those general ed courses mapped out and that we have consistency across them. Because as you've heard, I think that's where we always get tripped up.
Okay, any other input? Yep, Chris?
I was just going to add the gen eds also provide, I mean, we can't lose touch with the fact that we're providing high school students with options to explore different career pathways. So for a lot of students, they think they want to go one direction, let's take a dual enrollment class in that gen ed area, and then maybe decide that that isn't the pathway for them. But they tried another course that they're really excited about and really passionate about. and it kind of sets them in that direction for their journey. So I think to the extent we want to build out really concrete pathways, we also want to maintain a student's ability to explore and sort of try different career options that may be available.
Yeah. Commissioner Russell Tucker?
I just want to double click on what that was said because that's what I was processing. We've heard that from students. I thought I wanted this, right? But I did something else, and now I'm really passionate about that. And I just want to make sure we're not taking away that option.
Yep.
That, when we talk about career pathways, it's about them exploring and maybe not landing on exactly where they want to be. And so we've got to just make sure that that is in the queue for them as well.
Yep.
And I think just to add to that point, we have to keep in mind these are 14, 15-year-olds making these decisions. So it's kind of hard to determine, at 15 what you want to do with the rest of your life. So that exploration is really critical.
Yeah. Gabrielle?
I agree with everything that was said about Gen Ed. I also feel like it increases the chances of success in these courses because if we have students that are in pathways that they thought they were interested in and no longer are, like how successful are they going to be, So I feel like it does definitely increase this chance of success rate.
Thank you.
Great.
And let's fly through the
The
next two, and
last
then we'll
one is we talked about NACEP accreditation. This is the gold standard. And so we also really have to focus on proactively identifying qualified teachers to become certified. And that's prioritized in the hiring standards for colleges and universities. So some of the implications, Ben, if you want to scroll down, that we have for this one is really a robust program that's going to audit teacher credentials to identify teachers qualified for dual enrollment instruction but haven't applied to become certified, and that teachers would be supported in this application process. We also talked about professional development for teachers that are currently unqualified to meet and how to get them up to that if they have an interest in that, whether it's obtaining their master's degree or other credentials, and then also incentives to teachers and schools to encourage people to want to get that additional training and professional development. Of course, we will have to think about the union contracts, of which there's many when you think about the districts as well as higher education. But those are some of the ones related to NACEP accreditation.
So, yeah, Chris?
I would just add that the work that the department did with the Art Besser grants and the district directed grants to help grow dual enrollment, I think that paved a really powerful example of what districts can do when they get funding. Our program worked directly with a number of districts in terms of helping identify teachers that weren't certified, that were close to being certified, and really carving out like what additional coursework or professional development opportunities could they pursue. So I think when you show districts that they have access to support teachers in this, it's really critical. I've done a whole thing for NACEP and the ACEP around talent management strategies through dual enrollment, because I think oftentimes we always think that to support teachers, it has to be finance, but sometimes just districts giving dual enrollment teachers the P&C block to work on what they need to do for the university, or giving them the one Tuesday a month where the after school PD is directed for them to support their students or to support the extra work that they have to do for the university. I think there's a lot that we can do in the talent management space to help dual enrollment and AP and IB teachers feel supported and sort of incentivize that doesn't always require money.
Yeah. Keith?
Thank you, and thanks a lot to my former CSD colleague, Chris Todd. I was just going to make those points, but a few more. And, again, we did put forth a very substantial grant program in order to help teachers, helps districts give teachers the stipends and pay for the coursework to become certified. But, and there was a great building block and it was a great start. We need to keep doing that. And so there is that financial concern, but there's also, issues that we have to support teachers on, such as when is this going to be done? And not all teachers have that time after classwork. They have some other jobs. Some have families to take care of, so we have to figure out what those supports are, and really, I think, do perhaps a better job statewide of letting our teachers and our districts know what their options are and what programs will be available if we're successful in this endeavor. I think there are a lot of teachers who are interested but don't really know how to become certified if they're not in a district, particularly a smaller district or a rural district that has a lot of dual enrollment courses. There might not be that peer-to-peer support that would be very helpful, I think.
Peer-to-peer support. Thank you. And Commissioner Russell Tucker.
Just adding to what was said, and hopefully our recommendations will build on what we've seen work. So back to the example that both Keith and Chris talked about, because what we did was to incentivize rather than mandate.
Yep.
So that really is something to think about.
Yep.
Because the first thing folks also, we want to mandate something, but we can see what incentives do, and it is worth keeping that in mind.
Good call. So the last recommendation is all about funding, just so the group knows, like part of the recommendation is the state has to fund this stuff. We're going to do it. We're going to think through that. Just for the sake of time, because we have 6 minutes left, we do need to go to credentialing. So, Jeff, if you wouldn't mind walking through this one, I will share my screen again. And we don't have a ton of time to go deep on this, but there's also less recommendations. So Jeff, you want to take this one away?
Yeah, and the focus is recommendation one there. Where relevant, credential value is aligned with the career pathway, will be built into a sequence of study. Selection of COBs will follow the Office of Workforce Strategy framework that's developed as part of the Lumina Foundation, and which will be a subset of the IRCs that are part of the state. It's kind of the recommended, statement. Ben, do you want to go down and look at the kind of the key considerations for that? Rick, and then hit B and C. So just a few very brief considerations under A. The COV framework, is still in development, and implications, OWS criteria is expected to be finalized, in the fall. So we're not clear on, how many credentials will qualify and if they'll be available, in all of those industry pathways. Cost of exams and certifications, and also the stackable credential route. We may need to look at that component. If a COB can't be obtained, we do it in a stackable manner. And the implications for both of those, it's a reported barrier to credential attainment, by districts from what we've gotten for information, and not all IRCs, currently will stack to a COB. So I don't know if I want to start there with any kind of thoughts or feedback in relation to that statement and some of the considerations and implications in the amount of time we have left.
I think the last one is important. And yeah, I would love for Tracy and Karen to jump in. But, if we're going to say each pathway is going to have some sort of credential value or some credential that will stack to one, what's offered now in schools might not always really, really stack to a credential of value. And that's a structural issue. Like they're not actually transferable to anything. They don't actually build upon each other. So how do we want to address that in our recommendations?
I mean, I think an IRC is important in that if it leads to employability. So whether or not it stacks into a credential of value, I think will be the determination. You can have two separate lists, certainly. As far as the criteria and OWS, for the fall 2026, we are right on, on schedule right around that time. But my suggestion would be, let's focus on what pathways this committee decides to move on first, and determining what those credentials of value will be. So because there are thousands of potentials, we would start with those pathways decided on by this committee. I have no comments about the cost.
All right. A couple other recommendations that aren't built out yet, but just things that we wanted to float to you all and that I think could be built out, are B and C. Jeff, you want to take these?
Yeah, just quick recommendations, to expand the pipeline of CT instructors, having, alternative certification pathways, programs to expedite certifications, things such as itinerant teachers, additional flexibilities. For example, we're here in Southeastern Connecticut. We've got Pfizer, maybe a retiring, scientist. Well, could we have that person come in to teach a course potentially, to bring in some experiences? And then C, recommendations to expand settings of where courses can be taught to address the capital constraints. We talked a little bit about this, other alternative neighboring districts, CTEX, RESCs, what are the implications with that? Transportation is a big one that we've heard, and obviously funding. So some key considerations in both of those. Thoughts, share outs?
The idea between those two is, public high schools aren't really set up right now to offer a credential to every student going through a pathway program. It's going to require more instructors. It's going to require more places for these courses to be taught. And as part of our recommendations, we can include things for that. I think at the last commission meeting, I can't remember who said it, but it's such a good point. Like, it's unreasonable to think that every high school is going to have a welding program. So what do you do to address that?
And Ben, can I just offer, we already have, some experience of this in the healthcare pipeline because nurses are required to teach everything from a CNA to nursing courses.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of competition for those educators already. So want to just be really mindful that, we're not, if we don't need a licensed professional to teach the course, then let's not use them in those ways because it'll create downstream problems for those of us who have to have a credentialed teacher in that way. So just thinking about some of those constraints because it's already hard to find some of those folks.
So we have 1 minute left and we're meeting again on the 11th. How'd you guys feel about homework? Because we didn't get through all the credential stuff. What we can do is definitely clean these up so that they're more robust. And if we could just get feedback from you all before the 11th, because really the turnaround from our next working group meeting to the full commission meeting is like 2 days. So we want to go into the 11th with something that people feel confident about. So what Christina, Jeff, and myself will do is we will clean up these recommendations, build them out, and we're just going to ask for folks to provide written feedback on them. We'll think of the smartest way to collect that. And then on the 11th, we'll have a presentation for you all. That the plan is that will be what we show on the 13th. And the other thing just for this group to think about is how the meeting's going to be structured is there's going to be breakout time to get feedback on things. Are there key things that we want feedback from all the other commission members on, to really drive that discussion? So I'll follow up in an email with all this information for you all. Really, really appreciate your participation, everyone. Everyone's insight is extremely valuable. And I will see you on the 11th, and you will be hearing from me before that.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey, Ben, I'm going to